Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, I am Blake Smith, and with me are my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt and Mr. Ryan Roberts. How are y'all doing?
Doing fantastic.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah. So we're doing fantastic. I know it's Ferocious Females Month we're starting, and this is our third one. Our third one this year.
This is
on the show.
Yeah, this is our third annual Ferocious Female Month. So if you have not been following us, but just a few little bits, we do for the month of May, Ferocious Female Month in honor of Mother's Day, where we bring you the baddest of the baddies of females. We shine the light fully on them. In the past, we've covered everything from true crime and hauntings to all that, but it seems like this month we're going to kind of take a step back away from the kind of the paranormal, if you will, and give you a little bit more historical ferocious females. And that's why we're kicking this one off with Cleopatra.
See, and that
Hell yeah.
the historical ferocious females is more my territory. I'm a big history nerd, so I am excited to see what you dug up on Cleopatra this time.
Oh, she's fascinating. Let's just say by the end of it, there's like 3 deaths. She's yeah. Everybody she knows by the end of this is dead as well as she. Okay, it's not a happy ending. I think we all know how it ends. So
I mean, she's the definition of ferocious.
Yeah, that's true. But no, she's got a very interesting story and fun little tidbit before we get started. I want to welcome back our Twitter audience because we are now live back on Twitter on Wednesday nights, whenever we ever been live on Wednesdays. Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. So you can now catch us live on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Facebook on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. So that's awesome. But no, anyways, back to Cleopatra. Yeah, she is. She's one of those that I don't know. There's something about her that absolutely fascinates me. Ancient Egyptian times, as you can tell. I mean, I'm covered in tattoos of it. I'm fascinated by it. I had a weird recurring dream that I was like an ancient Egyptian child wandering the streets and all that stuff like growing up. So for some reason, I'm weirdly connected to ancient Egyptian times, I guess you could say.
So I mean, you've been in hog heaven researching this.
I have. Yes, I have. So, but I've got a lot to cover. So I'm literally just going to go ahead and just bust it down. Let's get through it. Because I hate to do it to y'all, but this will be a part 1, part 2, because it's Cleopatra. You can't do her justice in just one. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, well, tonight we are kicking down the door to a realm we've yet to explore. It is a realm of intrigue, power, ambition, and an inevitable conclusion. It's an era where survival hinges on the edge of a blade. It's the realm of ancient Egypt. These layered centuries of antiquity are often condensed into a single epic by many, but truth be told, we are closer to the last pharaoh of Egypt than they were to the construction of the pyramids. It's the ancient world of gods, a time when women ruled with incomparable power as queens, protectors, warriors, champions, mothers of nations. They knelt to no man, their achievements echoing defiantly throughout history. And perhaps the most majestic of them all was the iconic Cleopatra, an enigmatic figure. She was on the brink of possessing everything, holding the Western world in her hands for a fleeting moment. Her achievements are abundant. In temples across Egypt and even in Rome, depictions of mother goddesses were erected. Cleopatra exercised command over her own armies and fleets, joining her troops and strategizing their maneuvers herself, bestowing upon this remarkable woman the unexpected advantage of military expertise. Her economic prowess commanded Rome's attention, prompting the empire to take notice. At the brink of Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire, Cleopatra seized control and deftly maneuvered Roman statesmen to resist the encroaching tide of Roman dominance. She was a titan of commanding influence, obtaining adoration and dread in equal measure, revered and intimidated by Egypt, pursued and reviled by Rome. Her love was profound, her battles cunning, baffling her adversaries at every turn. As she marched through the annals of history, she left behind footprints no mortal man could ever erase. Queen Cleopatra bore the weight of a nation of millions upon her shoulders, a living, breathing Egyptian goddess. But she was also mortal, living in a world where those closest to her would rather see her dead for their own power and greed. She confronts dangers no man ever will. Procuring and producing an heir was not just a necessity, but also a gamble with the divine. A pharaoh and her progeny could easily die during childbirth as any commoner or peasant. She stands alone in her audacity, daring to pursue and achieve succession through her own offspring, defying convention and asserting her power in a manner typically reserved for men. She seamlessly melded exceptional leadership with her fertile womb, bearing the children of mighty men without ever relinquishing her own autonomy or subservience as a wife. These convergences of destinies, driven by ambition, determination, and love, could reshape an entire empire or shake it to its very foundation. But what is a pharaoh? She is the embodiment of the vast deserts and boundless heavens and all that lies in between. Egypt, her firstborn, demands her unwavering vigilance. And when the hour of reckoning arrives, she must stand prepared to sacrifice all for the preservation of her most cherished treasures. Yet, why has her true legacy remained obscure? History, crafted by the triumphant, offers but a distorted lens through which to view her. Roman propaganda and scant records cloud the reality of Cleopatra's formidable existence. Writers and poets spin tales of her seductive prowess, painting her as a witch and an enchantress. Hollywood perpetuates the myth of her ascent to power through feminine wiles alone. However, these narratives stray far from the truth. While first-hand accounts may be scarce, the annals of history should be rewritten, dispelling the notion of a woman who merely climbed the ladder through seduction alone. Cleopatra's true power and prowess demands recognition beyond the veil of myth and misconception. And for that, we got to start at the beginning.
Cleopatra, hashtag bad bitch.
Cleopatra, bad bitch. No, so before we jump into the narrative, sorry, that's my like opening wrap up of her. I fucking love her. But before we plunge deep into this narrative, I want to pause for a second to kind of let y'all know like where we're at in history. With the passage of time, it's recorded differently. Obviously, we find ourselves in BCE at this point, and if you're unsure, each subsequent year is numerically less than the one before. So 45 BCE, then 44, 43, so forth. So we're descending the timeline, okay? So that way you're not confused. It's not like the years now. I'm also going to go ahead and address probably the most contentious aspect of Cleopatra's history, and it is a big one. It is highly debated and a little nerve-wracking, but anyways, it's her appearance. I'm just going to face it.
Okay.
Now, I understand many listeners may equate Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor, thanks to the iconic film featuring the actress. But there are those who also envision Cleopatra with curlier hair and a darker complexion. Now, here's the thing. She assumes various guises for different individuals. She's been portrayed as Egyptian, black, white, lighter sun skin complexion, olive skin, pale. She embodies all of these many forms. So my perspective on it is that since we don't really have contemporary portraits of her, aside from coinage, which we'll talk about, I view her as somewhat of a chameleon. Her appearance shifts depending on whose narrative you're encountering and what the environmental influences are of the time that shape the depiction. So
right.
I'm not going to dwell on her appearance. That's not what I'm here for, except for the brief moments with the coins that we'll talk about. But what I am going to do is just urge you to envision whatever Cleopatra you perceive her as, because I think that's the least. We get so hung up on that, her looks and her sexuality. And I think that that's the least important thing in this story of this woman, this formidable woman. I'm not saying her ethnicity is inconsequential, but I'm going to present the facts to the best of my ability, and I'm going to allow you, listeners, viewers, stuff like that, to draw your own conclusions. So I want to cover those right out.
Well, she lived in ancient Egypt. If she was
Right.
pale skinned, she'd have been sunburned all the damn time.
Right. And
So-
she was Greek, right?
She
was
was.
Greek and Egyptian.
She was. I will get into that a little bit. I'll get into her ancestry and genealogical aspect of it a little bit, and you'll kind of understand where the confusion is, because yes, she is born in Egypt, so
Right.
she is technically Egyptian,
Right.
but she was Greek. She was, the pharaohs were very hardcore. I'll touch on this again later, but very hardcore on that bloodline being like pure Greek Macedonian bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see a lot of, incestuous relationships to keep that bloodline pure, as they put it. So, well, Cleopatra the Seventh, Theophilopater, reigned as the Queen of Egypt's Ptolemaic kingdom reigned as the Queen of Egypt of the Ptolemaic kingdom from 51 to 30 BCE, serving as its final sovereign. As part of the esteemed Ptolemaic lineage, she can trace her ancestry back to Ptolemy I, a respectable Macedonian Greek general who was a trusted companion of Alexander the Great. Some sources stating possibly cousin, even half-brother, but I'm not going to go down that route. But nowadays, she is commonly known simply as Cleopatra, instead of Cleopatra VII. According to various historians, the numerical designations are primarily for identification purposes only, rather than indicative of their reign or significance, or even if they reigned. So from here on out, I'm going to refer to her simply as Cleopatra, and any other pharaohs, rulers, or royal lineage by their first name and numerical designation, just for clarity, because as you can see, or you're about to see, it's going to get very fucking confusing.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
George Foreman got the idea. Name all of them the same name.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, but by the time that Cleopatra came to the throne, the Ptolemies had ruled over Egypt for over 2.5 centuries, which is the longest dynasty to date. This illustrious lineage of the Ptolemies originated, as I said, in the wake of Alexander the Great's triumphant conquest of Egypt after ousting the Persians. And seeking divine legitimacy, he ends up going to the Oracle of Siwa, who proclaimed him as a progeny of Amun, the god, or the god Amun. And he already kind of saw himself as a demigod thanks to his mother, who was like, oh, you're the son of Zeus. And so this just kind of confirmed it for him.
Right.
But upon his demise, his vast Macedonian empire gets parceled out, so to speak, among basically his closest companions, loyal generals, things like that. Ptolemy I is the one that becomes the ruler over Egypt. So from then we get Ptolemy II, third, fourth, and so on and so on and so on. It's called the Ptolemaic kingdom for a reason. They're all freaking Ptolemies. But the Ptolemaic dynasty emerged as a saga steeped in fascination, ambition, and unyielding ruthlessness. From the moment they seized the throne of Egypt, the Ptolemies wielded power with an iron grip, stopping at nothing to maintain their dominance. Within the royal court, treachery and betrayal were rife as siblings vied for supremacy, often resorting to schemes of deceit and assassination to eliminate the rivals. Dynastic marriages, once held as alliances of power, often descended into bitter rivalries, tearing at the fabric of familial bonds with blood-soaked hands. As they set up on their thrones, the Ptolemies ruled with a tyrant's hand. What are you laughing at, Joey?
Read that part again about I think the word you meant to say was bonds.
What did I say?
Blondes.
Ripping up the
Tyrant
blondes.
blonde.
Whatever. I gotta take a drink. Damn, the familial bonds with blood-soaked hands.
Yeah, the familiar blondes, I believe.
Yeah,
is
the
what-
familial blondes. Yeah, the familial blondes. All right.
I heard
yeah.
it. I'm like, okay.
It was tearing at the fabric of familial bonds
Bonds,
with
gotcha,
blood.
gotcha.
So
Yeah.
I got a lot of B's and L's in there right there. Okay, give me a break. No, I'm just kidding. But as they set up on their thrones, the Ptolemies ruled with a tyrant's hand, extracting every last drop of wealth from their subjects through crippling taxes and exploitation. Dissent was swiftly crushed beneath the weight of their armies, and dissenters silenced through torture and execution. Ptolemaic armies swept across lands far and wide, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake as they carved out their dominion with sword and fire. Now, life within this Ptolemaic dynasty, what Cleopatra is born into, was akin to a relentless narrative of deception and strife. From clandestine alliances to lethal betrayals, each member navigated a perilous existence teetering on the brink of chaos. That about sums it up.
So it's like any family reunion.
It's like any family reunion. That is so true, my friend.
He looked at me crossways. I don't like
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is like any family reunion. You're so flipping right on that. But the Ptolemaic siblings were ensconced in a world where power brokering and intrigue were second nature. They surrounded themselves with loyal entourages, each member playing a crucial role in the cutthroat competition for supreme power. Even as children, they relied on adult guardians from the populace of Alexandria to safeguard their interests and groom them for political maneuvering. Now, the women of the royal household emerged as formidable players in the deadly Game of Thrones. Long before Cleopatra's time and centuries prior to the Ptolemies' reign, Egyptian women possessed significant rights and autonomy in various aspects of their lives. They had the freedom to choose their own spouses, a privilege which was uncommon in the ancient world. Their status was reflected in the considerable growth of libraries during their eras. That's what they put a lot of their time into. In matters of inheritance and property ownership, they were on equal footing with men, able to inherit equally and manage their assets independently. And unlike in many societies of the time, married women retained control over their property and weren't subservient to their husbands. They even had the right to initiate divorce and receive support afterward with provisions for lodging until their dowry was returned. How would you like that? How'd you like that? Yeah, I get lodging from your ass until you return my dowry.
That's fine. I have a barn right outside.
Well,
You want to stay?
legal protection favored wives and children in case of disputes, ensuring their interests were safeguarded. Egyptian women typically married later than their counterparts in neighboring cultures, with only a fraction marrying by the age of Cleopatra. When we get to her, when she comes to the throne, about 18. Their economic activities range from lending money to operating businesses such as barges and perfume production. And they also held positions as priests in native temples, pursued legal action, and engaged in cultural pursuits like hiring musicians. Woo, hiring musicians. Now, whether as wives, widows, or divorcees, they possessed and managed various assets, including vineyards, ships, and slaves as well. And it's estimated that up to a third of the Ptolemaic Egypt's wealth may have been under female ownership.
So unlike most powers at the time, very women-centered, very...
It's kind of equal-ish, if you
right.
will.
Right.
Until you got a few that come along and fuck it up for everybody.
Right, okay. So women were revered and respected in society versus the rest of the ancient
They were
world.
they were very respected within society. They were seen. Well, let me cut the back. The royal household. The royal household is what we're talking about. The royal household. Let me reiterate that because I don't want everybody being like, "Oh, they said that the Egyptian women were when they're I'm not getting into that.
Well, in stark contrast to most other royal houses where their daughters were treated like cattle to gain political favor in another country or alliances.
And what you're kind of seeing here is what Cleopatra is eventually going to be brought into and grown up around. So that is why I'm kind of giving you this little bit of a backstory so you can understand what these people's mindset were within this dynasty. I mean, it is cut freaking throat. Right. They didn't give a shit. This was a realm where family ties were both a shield and a sword, where siblings battled for superiority and coalitions were forged and shattered with impunity. Sister turned against sister, mother against daughter in this relentless pursuit of control and influence. Take, for instance, give you a little lovely story here. The rivalry between Cleopatra III, the daughter, and Cleopatra II, the mother. Now you see why it gets confusing. Mm-hmm. In a daring bid for power, Cleopatra III, the daughter, usurped her own mother, marrying her uncle, Ptolemy VIII, to solidify her grip on the throne. She proclaims herself as Isis, the goddess Isis, which gives her political standing and religious authority, which isn't out of the ordinary. I mean, pharaohs were gods on earth. And Cleopatra II, the mother, undeterred by her deposition, rallied support and launched a fierce rebellion against her own daughter and her brother, her former husband as well. And in a gruesome act of retribution, Ptolemy VIII ruthlessly murdered his own son by Cleopatra II, decapitating him, dismembering him, and sending his severed limbs to his mother at court on her birthday as a macabre birthday gift.
Damn, the mom ain't got nothing on these people.
Hold on. And in retaliation to that, she publicly displayed the body parts of her own son. They didn't give shit. When I say they didn't care, they didn't care. Well, in this brutal world of palace intrigue and familial duplicity, allegiances were a fleeting commodity. And survival often came at a staggering cost. Cleopatra, born into this crucible of power and ambition, would grow up knowing that her path to greatness would be paved with blood and sacrifice as well. So this is that legacy that we get to that's left behind when we get to Ptolemy the 12th, which is Cleopatra's father. And real quick blurb on him. He was never meant to be king. He was illegitimate. He was the son of, king and I can't even remember off the top of my head. I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not going to say anything. He was illegitimate. That's all you need to know. And basically how he becomes king is that with all the familial fighting, everybody wiped out everybody. There was nobody left. So the people of Alexandria are like, hey, you got a little blood in you. You might be illegitimate, but come on, it's your turn to take the throne. And so even being illegitimate, he still assumed the throne, took the Egyptian rights to become pharaoh, and ended up marrying his sister, Cleopatra V. Yeah. Lots of, yeah.
You said something about marrying an uncle. I ain't no uncle I got I'd want to marry.
Say, this family
I
tree
I
does
love
not
them
fork.
all, but No.
No, this family tree is very confusing and is more like a little shrub at this point. So,
Mhm. It just goes straight up. There's no forks on this thing.
pretty much. Now we're confident. Historians are confident that Ptolemy the 12th is Cleopatra's father. The identity of her mother, though, remains very shrouded in uncertainty. And I'm going to throw up her family tree here, so you can kind of follow along as I'm telling you this. The Ptolemies were notorious, as we previously discussed, for their incestuous unions of brother-sister marriages, adding layers of complexity to Cleopatra's maternal lineage. Though some historical records suggest that Ptolemy the 12th's consort was Cleopatra V, speculation persists that Cleopatra's mother could have actually been Cleopatra VI, another member of the royal household or court, a maiden. However, I doubt the last ones are kind of plausible because, as I said earlier, you got to consider, to be considered for the throne, the Ptolemies relied heavily on that pure Macedonian Greek bloodline.
Mhm.
That was their thing. So the fact of trying to have a child outside of that's highly unlikely. So now to confuse it even more, Ptolemy the 12th had two brothers. You can probably guess their names. Ptolemy and Ptolemy. These, yeah.
Just like a law firm. Ptolemy.
Well, these three brothers also had two sisters, and I'll give you one guess.
Cleopatra?
And Cleopatra. Yes, very good.
No
Shelley.
way.
Yeah.
I'm catching on.
Confusing as hell at the dinner table, but you know what? Works for them. Whatever. So among these siblings, numerous marriages occurred, furthering and tangling the familial web of the Ptolemies at this time, Cleopatra's immediate family. But despite this myriad of possibilities, most reputable sources lean towards Cleopatra V as the most likely candidate for Cleopatra's mother, given her status as the only historical wife of Ptolemy XII. But still, it's kind of like we don't know, because there is question about who Cleopatra V was, because she like disappears when Cleopatra's born and then like reappears later on, but now she's Cleopatra VI. It's confusing as hell. I'm not going to go into all that. Either way, regardless of who her parents were, Cleopatra entered the world in 69 BCE in the vibrant Egyptian hub of Alexandria. Now, this cosmopolitan city pulsated Greek influence. It is not, especially in architectural marvels in its culture and artistic expression. This is not like when you think Egypt, the images of Egypt, this is very heavily Greek influence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very multicultural, very intellectual. There was many different populations there. I think some of the biggest ones were obviously Egyptian population, Greek population. I think you have a sizable Jewish population as well. I think all in all, there was like 13 different types of or different populations living in Alexandria at the time. You've also got the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which is a wonderful symbol of enlightenment. And you also got the Great Library of Alexandria that would come to ruin in a very short time. I think the sizes of that, I find that fascinating. The resources in that equaled up to like 500,000 books or something like that from every corner of the world. So yeah,
right.
When that was lost, there was a lot of resources lost. But the Alexandria of Cleopatra's time is a world far apart from the Egypt that we envision today. It is a thriving center of learning, creativity, and cosmopolitanism. And although not much is really known about Cleopatra's childhood, we do know that she spent her early years in this setting within Alexandria. And we know that she was also very extremely intelligent. So it's going to be wise to assume she spends a lot of her time at the Library of Alexandria studying languages, math, sciences, etc. I think it's said that she knew upwards of 9+ different languages and could speak them all fluently and traverse in between them with ease.
Wow.
So she is extremely smart. So as Cleopatra begins to get older during this tumultuous reign of her father, Ptolemy XII, Egypt's fortunes kind of take a very dramatic turn, shifting from opulence to subservience, really, under the looming shadow of the new rising power, Rome. And Rome's going to play a big part in this story. Now, Egypt, once the crown jewel of the Nile, languished in the twilight of its former glory, becoming a client state of Rome, massively in debt. As Ptolemy XII grappled with the burdens of governance, Egypt's once flourishing economy began to wither, succumbing to the weight of mismanagement and external pressures. Because most notably, Ptolemy as well, he finds himself basically ensnared in this web of Roman politics, this power dynamic, this struggle, and he's never really been popular in Alexandria because of the question of his illegitimacy. But at the same time, in this political maelstrom of that's happening in Rome, these anti-Senate factions were like, "Hey, we're gonna annex you, just so you know. We're basically just gonna take you in." So in a bid to like shore up support, Ptolemy XII, he ends up backing some people, Pompey the Great, and he bribes Julius Caesar with 6,000 talents in gold, which is a huge sum of money for them. And basically he's like, hey, just recognize my kingship. That's all I ask. So he's the one that's pushing Egypt kind of further and further into debt that Cleopatra is about to inherit. So I think it's interesting. Father and daughter both play a role in Julius Caesar's story. Well, despite initial opposition, the Senate eventually relents, rejecting the notion of Roman annexation of Egypt. However, the price of the support was steep. Ptolemy XII was compelled to renounce the Ptolemaic claim to Cyprus, which was under the rule of his brother Ptolemy of Cyprus. Don't you love it? Well, the loss of Cyprus and Ptolemy XII's subservient stance toward Rome incited outrage among the populace of Alexandria, leading to his exile from Egypt in 58 BCE. Now, it's speculated and mostly agreed upon that Cleopatra, then she's probably about 11 to 12 years old, she accompanies her father into Roman exile, where they resided at General Pompey's villa and then started employing more bribery to sway the Roman senators back to recognizing his kingship. So he's in exile and putting the country more and more into debt. Well, Cleopatra V, the one we talked about earlier, and their eldest daughter, Bernice IV, were installed as rulers in his absence. And during that period, Cleopatra V passes away, leaving Bernice IV as the sole ruler. Quite a different, because at this point, thanks to another Bernice and her messy marital affairs, women had to have male co-rulers. And so it's like, whoa, why do we have just a female on the throne? And she ends up seizing this opportunity to gain power and leads an opposition in Alexandria against her own father. But the tides turn, and roughly about 3 years in political of exile, Ptolemy comes back to the throne, and he swiftly executes his own daughter, Bernice IV, for her audacious seizing of the throne and leading his opposition in Alexandria. So we kind of see this chapter in Cleopatra's early life when she's like, I don't know, 11 to 14 years old. That's marked by exile, political intrigue, this familial conflict, which is kind of like a precursor to her dramatic events that would come to take place. Now, Cleopatra consistently sought to distance herself from the volatile dynamics of the Ptolemaic dynasty from an early age. She's raised in an atmosphere fraught with suspicion and peril, where she herself is navigating this landscape abundant with these threats and constantly vigilant against her adversaries and poison plots, especially. Now, I will tell you, none of the pharaoh's offspring, meaning Cleopatra and her siblings, meet natural ends. Just FYI, I'm going to go ahead and spoil the story for you right there.
We're talking about people in power. Of course, they're not going to meet natural ends. Yeah,
no,
extremely rare.
Yeah, they either fell victim on the battlefield or familial assassinations, most before reaching maturity. So growing up amidst such like trepidation and uncertainty undoubtedly shaped Cleopatra into like this resilient survivor that we're going to end up seeing later on. But for those who did survive into adulthood, it fostered a strategic mindset, necessitating the ability to set aside emotions and confront dire circumstances with ingenuity and resolve. So now you can kind of see her mindset shape, what she's growing up in.
They're being primed to rule in this.
That's basically it. Yeah, world. This cutthroat world.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how she's being taught from a young age from her family of how to handle situations. Just decapitate your sister. That's fine. Just go for it, man. She took the throne. Just be done with her already. Well, when Ptolemy XII reclaimed authority from Bernice IV in 55 BCE, I'm going to say it's vital to recognize like this paramount importance of alliances within the Ptolemaic realm right now. Cleopatra, now approximately about 14 years of age, she finds herself thrust into a position of shared governance with her father, who deemed it pragmatic to appoint her as co-regent of the kingdom. Now, I'm not going to imply that she wed her father or shared his bed or anything like that, but it's easy to kind of infer that she was right there alongside of him, more than likely, when Bernice IV was executed. So she was probably sitting right there on the throne with her father whenever her sister was beheaded. And it's also here while on the throne that Cleopatra actually encounters Mark Antony for the first time, which is kind of like this inconsequential meeting. Now, he is a 25-year-old Roman officer at the time in Alexandria on military and diplomatic duties. He'll end up saying that this is the moment that he fell in love with her, and Cleopatra's like, yeah, not so much. But nevertheless, it's plausible that this acquaintance began at this point, possibly a friendship. So
at what point, at what age is Cleopatra at this point? You said
she's about 14 at this point.
Okay.
Yeah,
14,
she'd be about
right.
14
Cool.
when she was sharing the throne with her father.
All right.
Ew, I didn't realize that he was 25 when she was 14. Yuck.
Yeah.
I told y'all gonna love the things we're talking about tonight. Welcome
I did
to
not
ancient
realize
Egypt.
that.
No.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Welcome to ancient Egypt. Oh, just wait till we get old Julius Caesar into the mix in here in just a little
Julius
bit.
Caesar slimeball.
Like you got incest, you got murder, you got that. Ugh.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, during her co-regency, Cleopatra witnesses her father's struggles in navigating alliances and with rival Roman senators. Rome, while asserting dominance, grapples with internal turmoil themselves, marked by political upheaval, civil conflict, and shifting administrations. They basically can't get their shit straight. But amid mounting debts, Ptolemy XII, he ends up drafting this will in Rome. He appoints his children, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII, another Ptolemy, as co-regents under the guardianship of the Roman people. And shortly before he dies, he does something. He ends up, I guess you say, putting them two into this divine relationship, which is a move that nearly seals Cleopatra's fate and ends her, because he names them as new gods loving siblings, which they were anything but. But it's very interesting because this happens a very short time before her father's passing. So it almost kind of seems like I don't know, maybe
losing it.
Yeah, I don't know. But he does it just before he passes. So he's already thrust his two children into this divine relationship. But following her father's passing, Cleopatra, she is now about 18. She adheres to the Egyptian tradition by marrying her, I couldn't quite pinpoint his age, between 10 and 13-year-old brother. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to ask, did she mourn her father's death, or she was just kind of like, okay, I'm ready to take over?
That's the thing. I found a couple of sources on that because I was kind of interested about that as well. For her, I think she was very much, I got to get down to business type thing. She did, from my understanding, love her father. And she was also not the eldest child, but seemed to reap the benefits the most growing up, from what I'm saying. So she may have been the favorite, but maybe not necessarily the one that was supposed to receive what she received.
Okay.
So I'm going to say, yeah, she probably did, but that's just my opinion after reading everything that I read. So, but anyway, she marries her. He's around 10 to 13. I think he's more towards the 13-year-old stage, but Ptolemy the 13th is who she marries. Now, obviously, Cleopatra's the far more experienced party in this. So she does something, and this is where you start seeing her wheels turn. This is where she starts stepping up to play the game. And she's starting to become this very diplomatic and very formidable woman, like from here on out. And the first move she does once she marries her brother, who's a little young, she pushes her name forward as acting pharaoh. And that is completely unorthodox, where she is the prominent role. Now, this does end up sparking tension with Ptolemy the 13th, her brother, and his influential advisor, Pothinus. I hate this man. I'm sorry. I don't hate much, but this man... Whew. Well, he is really the one that wants to consolidate all this power on behalf of the young. He wants to rule. He wants to be the one that's in charge, Pothinus. So he wants Ptolemy the 13th as sole ruler if he can, so that he can rule basically as regent until Ptolemy is old enough. Well, Pothinus manipulates Ptolemy the 13th into challenging Cleopatra's authority, igniting a volatile sibling rivalry and plunging Egypt into this civil clash. And the sibling conflict, it escalates into a straight-on civil war as Cleopatra fights to persevere her position and thwart her brother's conspiracies for sole kingship. That's what he's after, which this ultimately culminates into a struggle for survival amidst an already unstable political landscape. So, and this is really, if I'm getting this right, from my understanding, this is like Father dies, you're appointed, civil war erupts. Because we got sibling rivalry. We each want the throne for ourselves. So Cleopatra, she pushes back for this. And she's like, no. You're not going to do this shit. If you're going to start a civil war, I'm going to make sure I go down in history. So we actually have records of her on something known as a stela, which is like a stone tablet. And this shows Cleopatra dressed as a male pharaoh, replacing the sacred bull in the temple near Thebes. And this was an event that would have won over the Egyptian population. She's basically showing, I'm an Egyptian queen. I'm not just Ptolemaic. And there was a difference. Like Ptolemaic pharaohs, Macedonian Greek, and most of them failed to even learn the Egyptian language. They felt it was useless to do so. That is one of the language she took upon herself to go, I'm going to learn this.
So in a play, she's embracing tradition and saying, we're getting back to the old ways. And okay, that's very smart.
Oh yeah, she is. And so on another stela, we see her at this time. It shows her again dressed as a male pharaoh giving offerings to the goddess Isis, which helps to connect her even further with the Egyptian people, because Isis is like this all around mother goddess, you know, and so she's showing her connection to Isis. Well, all of that pisses off mainly Pothinus, but Ptolemy the 13th, who again retaliates. You have this war going back and forth between these siblings at this time.
Does he also try to embrace tradition as well and try to declare himself pharaoh, or is he just like sticking with the status quo?
It almost seems like he was sticking with the status quo, because you'll see that there's a couple of other instances throughout the story. Like he's being very pushed by his advisors, who are very like by the rule book type thing. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to get you sole kingship. You got to do it this way. This is tradition. This is how it's done. But I wasn't able to find anything where he reached out to the people. You know, it's like, hey, I'm your king. I'm here for you. So Cleopatra is really smart in this. She's taking this whole little turn and kind of going around behind her brother's back, if you will, saying, oh, no, I'll win.
Between 10 and 13. He really probably doesn't have a damn clue.
No, he doesn't. I'm sure he doesn't. I mean, I know he was raised in the same family, but of the inner workings of all of it, he's being very much led by his advisors on that. So Ptolemy the 13th, at the behest of more than likely Pothinus, he convinces General Pompey of Rome, who was a big guy at the time. I'll probably end up covering him in another podcast episode. Just know he is a general Rome with a military might of Rome behind him.
And he was the one that they fled to whenever the wars were going on and her father was ousted, right?
Correct.
That's the same guy. Okay.
Correct. This is the same guy that when Cleopatra and her father were in Roman exile, this is the guy that they stayed at his villa.
Okay.
So Ptolemy the 13th, he reaches out to Pompey the Great and gets him to formally renounce Cleopatra as co-sovereign. And again, he's got the military might and this long alliance, you know, dare I say friendship with their father, which is the former pharaoh. So this essentially breaches Ptolemy the 12th's will. But this really wouldn't have been that hard, because at this time in Rome, women were not seen as equal. I mean, let's just face it. Basically, Roman people, like the Roman men back then, abhorred female authority in any form of feminine governance. So they were like, oh yeah, Cleopatra, screw her, she's out. They basically wanted their women in the shadows while the men take charge. But moreover, with this Ptolemy the 13th, he also secures that entire military support. So Cleopatra she's kind of screwed at this point. She's been renounced as co-sovereign. He's got the military support. He's got Rome's background. So, and to ensure her survival, because she knows, listen, I'm on the throne or I'm dead. She flees, and she ends up abandoning abandoning Alexandria for Thebes. She goes to Thebes first. But she also takes along with her Arsinoe the Fourth, her sister. That's another one. Who sought refuge in Syria, where a lot of their father's friends were. Now, their escape marks the beginning of this extraordinary journey. I find this extremely fascinating because she's in Syria, and she accomplishes something that they're not even sure how she did it still. She ends up mobilizing troops. She's there for about 1 to 2 years. And somehow this army that she amasses allegedly surpasses 20,000 soldiers. I mean, it's
Yeah,
speculative.
because
Go
she's
ahead.
in Syria. What stake do they have in putting her back on the throne in
Well,
Egypt?
that's the thing. It's speculated. That's what I was going to say. It's speculated that the wealth of Egypt and its influence over its neighboring territories, as well as her father's reputation, may have played a significant role in those armies seeing her as the rightful heir to the throne. So many regions either owing allegiance to Egypt or fearing the repercussions even of not supporting Cleopatra, possibly were like, yeah, here's some troops. But nevertheless of that, historians are still baffled how basically this young woman in her early 20s now, very early 20s, banished from her homeland, achieved this amazing feat. Very much, it remains a subject of conjecture at this point. But I think that shows immense power that she already has in her early 20s. But Cleopatra's foremost advantage in this scenario lay in the composition of the army which she amassed, which primarily consisted of mercenaries, thieves, criminals, etc. And alongside this, but also these people, a lot of them had been betrayed, I guess you could say, quote unquote, by Pompey as well. They felt slighted by him. So they were like, oh, yeah, we got it. But alongside this banishment period, pivotal events were unfolding that would ultimately sway this tide in Cleopatra's favor. Now, I do have to back up just a little bit from Cleopatra's story because I got to bring in back those two people, Julius Caesar, General Pompey, both from Rome. We're still in 48 BCE. Cleopatra's in exile at this point, okay? These two men, they're embroiled in the Roman Civil War. So not only are they former allies, but they're also former family because I think it was Pompey married Julie, which is Caesar's daughter. Well, in short, this battle erupts between them two, known as the Battle of Pharsalus, I think is how it's pronounced, in which Pompey, he's defeated. So he believes he can find refuge in Egypt. He flees to Egypt with Caesar in hot pursuit. So he's seeking sanctuary, and Ptolemy the 13th and his advisors have three options at this point. Remember, Cleopatra's in exile. Welcome Pompey in, give him refuge, ultimately siding with the defeated and choosing their faction, which is go against Caesar. Not a good thing.
No.
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
And Ptolemy's just like, I just wanted my sister out of here. I don't want any of this shit. Like, why are you coming to me?
They can also take Pompey in as prisoner and deliver him alive to Caesar, or they can execute Pompey, potentially gaining favor with Caesar and consequently Rome as a whole, and siding with the victor. So he kind of really had this diplomatic issue on his hands, either way that he went.
Up with his head.
Well, in a grand dramatic turn of events, Ptolemy the 13th ultimately opted for the third option.
Oh!
Possibly influenced by his good old buddy, Pothinus. When Pompey arrived in Alexandria, his defeat was obvious, and Ptolemy the 13th realized they've backed the wrong man. Because remember, he got Cleopatra ousted. Well, as Pompey set foot on Egyptian soil, he was struck down by Achilles, not to be confused with Achilles, and Lucius Septimus at the behest of, again, more than like, shut up, Ryan. But he's struck down by these two gentlemen at the behest of, again, more than likely, Pothinus. Quick side note, Achilles is a commander of Ptolemy the 13th's troops, and Lucius Septimus was a Roman soldier and mercenary. So that's who took out Pompey. Pompey was not only killed, though, he was also beheaded. So, Shelley, off with his head. You're right. And according to some...
That's always been my choice. Just get rid of him. You're in my way. I'm done with you.
Well, according to some sources, his head was then carried on a lance through the streets of Alexandria. And upon Caesar's arrival in Alexandria, who's in hot pursuit, the 3-day-old severed head, and signet ring of Pompey the Great were allegedly delivered to Caesar, causing Caesar to actually weep, allegedly, at the sight of his former ally. But however, this action did not yield the outcome that Ptolemy the 13th and his advisors had hoped for. Because you see, the Romans adhere to a big, big, big unspoken rule that despite being adversaries, and even though conflicts sometimes pitted family members against one another, a legal fight to the end was demanded for Roman honor's sake. So they fucked up. They
weren't Roman. What do they care about that?
Right. Well, and also at the same time, you now have a foreign king killing a Roman soldier very brutally.
Yeah, he was kind of in a no-win situation.
He was in a no-win situation. That is true. Yeah. That is true.
I still think he chose correctly.
But this is my favorite. It's my favorite part about this because Cleopatra is hearing about all this, and she's just sitting over there like this on her throne, like just like thumbing her fingers together,
Right.
or probably stroking that big white cat, or something. So she realizes she also has been backing the losing side, the wrong side, the side against Caesar. Pompey's assassination had a couple effects. It made Caesar
What
distrust.
I'm about to have over here. Go ahead.
It made Caesar distrust Ptolemy XIII and his advisors, and it set the stage for Cleopatra to capitalize on the situation. So she ends up making her move. Now, accounts differ on what occurred next, but this woman got pretty damn smart about this. Some suggest that Cleopatra devised a plan to smuggle herself into the Alexandrian palace, where, adding insult to injury, Caesar had occupied a portion of the royal quarters. Cleopatra was said to have been concealed in a rolled-up rug, only to be revealed to Caesar as this gorgeous Egyptian woman in her royal garb looking flawless. However, this may not be entirely accurate. It is true that Caesar was in Egypt, and Cleopatra did see her chance for a private audience at the palace. And it is possible that, knowing her brother might stop her, she chose to be smuggled into the palace. It is also possible that, being Cleopatra, the pharaoh, she could have simply walked into the palace herself. Though probably not likely the preferred method, because you got to remember there was troops, soldiers, factions, and they all, Ptolemy wanted her dead. So I'm going to stick with the narrative she snuck in, but it's not in a rug. It's, from what I'm understanding and from what I read on some sources, is that it's the sack. She's actually carried in a sack. And she's not going to look perfect either when she gets thrown on the ground and the sack, is revealed. She's been in exile. She's being carried in a sack. More than likely what ends up happening is that this woman comes out of this sack, and Caesar, the allure of Cleopatra, where everybody's like, she, her feminine wiles, she put a spell on him. The allure to him was probably her cunningness and the brazen ploy to sneak inside. I mean, this encounter between Caesar and Cleopatra, I know everybody wants it to be this highly romanticized thing where they were just swooning and da-da-da-da-da. And I hate to burst your bubble, but it's probably not. It's probably just both a meeting of both mind and body, essentially. This pivotal moment that ends up altering their destinies as well as the destiny of the Western world. Caesar could have had any woman that he wanted. I mean, this just right after the other. Boom, boom, boom. He's the most powerful man at the time. He's the biggest celebrity at the time. So I don't think that feminine wiles, I think that's the part that needs to just be struck out. That's not going to do it. We do see this new narrative nowadays where it's kind of shifting. Cleopatra may not have been the most beautiful woman in the world, as the story now goes, but rather, I think it's like her intellect, her diplomatic prowess, that would have been extremely attractive to these
her
alpha
personality.
Yeah, to these alpha men. Not to mention Egypt's wealth, therefore her wealth. That would have been extremely appealing.
And he probably had to respect the fact that he was big on strategy. He liked his strategies. Right. This woman in exile just figured out how to sneak into his main room without detection. She got the jump on him. He probably had to respect that strategy that she employed to get in there. So. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree. But it's also with, like I said, she spoke over 9 languages, But anyways, I digress on that. So I don't think it's her feminine wiles. She's not a seductress. She's not an enchantress. She didn't put a spell on Caesar and then all of a sudden, some Egyptian magic, or Pharaoh magic or God magic, whatever. But she would have been unlike any woman he encountered, this equal in a Roman era where women weren't seen as such. In my view, she likely combined her intelligence, her charm, her femininity, right, as most would say today, employing her feminine wiles, whatever, to assist her in this request rather than it being center stage, the protagonist of her success, Well, the gravity of Cleopatra and Caesar's fateful encounter loomed heavily. Ptolemy XIII and his advisors, upon learning the truth of Caesar and Cleopatra's meeting, because they did, were struck with the realization that the game was now irrevocably over. They were like, shit, she got us. Because a private audience with Julius Caesar, it is a pivotal moment and one that would change the course of history. Ptolemy XIII was vying for it just as much as Cleopatra, and Cleopatra got the drop on him.
and basically got it first. He was not prepared for his sister to outmaneuver them, essentially. So Caesar brings forth the will, their father's will. And he reiterates, look, you two need to sit. He goes daddy mode. You two need to sit down, shut up. You're both supposed to rule. Share the sandbox. Here we go. I'm just trying to end this sibling rivalry. You're plaguing Egypt, damn it. You're working my nerves. You're going to be grounded. I just imagine this conversation.
I swear to God, if I have to get the army to come in here.
But with this declaration, there also comes like this shift in power as well. Because Cleopatra's brother and sister, Arsinoe IV, that we've already talked about, and her other brother, Ptolemy the 14th. I bet you didn't see that one coming. They are to preside over Cyprus. That was, the Ptolemies relinquished to Rome. So it's that strategic island in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. So this seemed kind of like a victory for Cleopatra. She gets put back on the throne. You're co-ruler. I'm recognizing you. I'm Caesar. Pompey's dead. I got the military. I'm recognizing you as co-ruler. So Ptolemy's like, fuck, now I got to share the shit with my sister again.
So, but was it you get Cyprus and you get Egypt? Is that kind of like what?
So basically, Ptolemy the 14th and Arsinoe the 4th, the 14th. So there is a younger Ptolemy the 14th, and Arsinoe the 4th, the two younger siblings, they get Cyprus. Ptolemy the 13th and Cleopatra are co-rulers again.
Okay.
So you have two Ptolemies in here, 13th and 14th.
Gotcha,
Told you it gets fucking confusing. I'm trying to keep it straight for you people, but I only got so many numerical designations I can give you to get you to understand. Well, while this seemed like a victory for Cleopatra, it also marked a crucial turning point. And this is a moment from which there absolutely is no return for her. It was the beginning of a very dangerous game that would pit her against her siblings one by one in a battle for supremacy. And Ptolemy the 13th wasted no time. Caesar is still in Egypt. He lingers a bit. And he seizes his opportunity. Ptolemy the 13th seizes his opportunity, swiftly moving to block the Roman general at the harbor and severed his supply lines. Now, Ptolemy the 13th now is about 16. So gotten a little bit smarter. Been on the throne for maybe about 3 years now. He ends up inciting a riot against Caesar and Cleopatra in Alexandria. And this initial fighting was completely fierce. Fires are breaking out everywhere. There's an accidental one that has spread to the Library of Alexandria, but it doesn't burn down at this time. At that time, the damage was minimal. But what followed was famously known as the Alexandrian War that takes place, I think it's about 6 months, 4-6 months, somewhere in there. But instead of weakening Caesar and Cleopatra, all Ptolemy the 13th did was basically drew Cleopatra and Caesar closer,
right,
both in defense and in passion for the following months. Now, at the time, Cleopatra, she is roughly now 21. Caesar is roughly 52. I knew someone was going to make a face on that one. I was just waiting for it. But anyways, so Caesar and Cleopatra were acutely aware that they were outnumbered. Caesar's fleet conspired merely of 10 warships and 4,000 soldiers. In contrast, Ptolemy the 13th and Arsinoe IV, who's now joined her brother, commanded approximately 22 warships, 50 more ships dispatched by the late Pompey, the Ptolemaic royal army, which consisted of around 22,000 infantry and cavalry, along with 2,500 Roman legionaries. This is in addition to the Alexandrian citizens who are ready to defend their homeland from the foreign intruder and his perceived traitorous consort now. That's how they're seeing Cleopatra. Now, remember, Caesar is a portion of the royal quarters. And during this time, he's trying to settle this rivalry. There with him is Ptolemy the 13th, Cleopatra, Arsinoe IV, and Ptolemy the 14th. All siblings are basically within the royal quarters at this time. So Ptolemy the 13th is actually kind of managing affairs from behind the enemy lines, if you will.
So they are all in royal quarters, and their armies are facing off outside, but they're
they're basically in the same house while their armies are facing. Okay. Yeah. Well, over time, both sides sought to fortify their positions. Good old Pothinus, he was. Shelly, you got to move that tablet. You typing all over the screen. We can all hear it.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
But good old Pothinus, he is discovered while communicating with the Ptolemaic royal army in the palace district. He is captured and he is executed. And after Pothinus's demise, now that's Ptolemy XIII's advisor. After Pothinus's demise, Arsinoe IV, she flees the palace district and she escapes. She orchestrates the murder of Achilles and took control of the Ptolemaic royal army through her advisor. And you got to remember that even though she is a princess, she could not control the army, even though she's like, I take control. So it had to be a man that led the army. So she controlled it through her former childhood tutor is what she did. Well, the Alexandrian War proved to be yet another grave miscalculation on the part of Ptolemy XIII and his now late advisors. Numerous allies of Caesar in the east rallied to his and Cleopatra's cause, and soon Caesar's reinforcements, fleets, archers, armies from Rome, Anatolia, Syria, Rhodes, Levant, they're emerging upon the forces of Ptolemy XIII and Arsinoe IV, who made no qualms about opposing and eradicating Cleopatra. It's during this time that the great Library of Alexandria burns, because the story goes Caesar had them shoot fire arrows up into the air. One hit the library, lit it on fire, burned it to the ground. So you can essentially say the greatest resource in history was lost thanks to sibling rivalry.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you can basically say that that's what it was chalked up to. Well, to summarize this portion of Cleopatra's story, Ptolemy XIII and Arsinoe IV's armies were ultimately defeated with the assistance of reinforcements and strategic military maneuvering on Caesar's part. That man was smart. I'll give him that.
I can see them seeing the armies come over the hill and they just go, well, shit.
Well, in the course of the events, Ptolemy XIII's fate was sealed. Now, depending on the account you read, Ptolemy XIII either slipped or fell from a ship into the Nile during the attacks. The weight of his armor pulling him under and leading him to drown during the Alexandrian War.
So
some reports
hold on.
Yep. Hold on. Some reports suggest he fell accidentally, while others claimed he was pushed at the behest of Cleopatra. Now, if that's to be true, Cleopatra just claimed her first familial victim. The war's over. The young king has perished. The princess, Arsinoe IV, has been captured. And she's to be transported to Rome, where she was to be bound in chains and paraded through the streets during Caesar's triumph. But there was one request from Cleopatra she had to Caesar: to make sure that her sister, Arsinoe IV, was executed for high treason. She did not want her to live, because she knew as long as she was alive, she was a threat to the throne. So Cleopatra said, I'm done. Kill her. Kill my sister. And that to me is like a turning point in Cleopatra's story, because now she's like, yeah, she my family, but fuck her.
I put up with your bullshit for way too long.
We done. Yeah. Well, before Caesar returns to Rome for his triumph, he extends his stay in Egypt with Cleopatra. This period is significant for Cleopatra's stories. It's one of the rare instances where this powerful man like Caesar neglects his state duties, possibly for the pleasure of love. Now, I want to be clear. There's no record showing and saying that Cleopatra loved Caesar, right out. Again, we want it to be highly romanticized, but unfortunately, I think it's just as what it is. I think Cleopatra was being very smart with what I'm about to tell you. Caesar spends approximately, to some accounts, around 3/4 of a year with Cleopatra, cruising the Nile, exploring monuments, historical sites, simply just kind of enjoying her time with her. But there's another reason. The Alexandrian War had pushed these two individuals a lot closer together, and Cleopatra is pregnant at this time. Which obviously draws them even closer. And I think that is why he stays for about 3/4 of the year, because do your math on that. Hello. Again, I'm not saying that they're in love. They may have been, but she knew what she was doing on some level.
Well, do you think, too, that it was also a thing where, they understood each other because they are in major positions of power? There's no one else like that, and it just kind of draws them closer together because they are from similar walks of life at this point.
I do. I very much. That's the thing. I think that when people say that Caesar was under her spell, I don't think that that's necessarily a fair thing to say. I just think he was like, I don't think he'd ever met a woman like that.
Right.
That held this position, this power, this authority, this wealth, this nation, this kingdom. She was in charge of all of it.
Sort of like a nobody else. Right. And it's sort of like nobody else understands me but you. You understand the burden that I carry.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. But this is the thing with Cleopatra. She knew that a child with Caesar, the greatest general of Rome, could have the potential to unite the two nations under one rule, which would be her child, her progeny, and in turn secure the future of her descendants. And this is something we're going to see later on in her life again and again. So I believe that Caesar lingered because Cleopatra was pregnant. I think he wanted to stay with her as her pregnancy progressed to, make sure that she's okay. But he eventually departs because this is where it gets fucked up and weird. Traditionally, he can't be seen with Cleopatra while she's giving birth. He's got a wife back in Rome. That. Yeah. Oops. So he can't be seen. That would have been a major blow to his wife Calpurnia, and would have come with major repercussions for him, since Cleopatra was not highly accepted in Roman society, which we'll touch on a little bit later. There's one guy that really doesn't like her. However, he does leave behind several legions of men, possibly for protection and to keep an eye on Cleopatra, even perhaps. So up to that point in his life, Caesar had only one living daughter with Calpurnia. Cleopatra's unborn child, therefore, had a 50% chance of being recognized as the blood heir of Julius Caesar. And the only issue was the legal aspect. Caesar couldn't marry Cleopatra, vice versa. They were already formally attached. So the illegitimacy of Cleopatra's son by Caesar would arguably be her greatest downfall, but there was no way to avoid it. Marriage for either one of them would have weakened their authority over their respective territories. But Caesar also acknowledges at this point, now Ptolemy XIII is dead. Before he goes back to Rome, he acknowledges Ptolemy XIV, hey, step up and take your place as co-ruler with your sister. And I'm sure God. Cleopatra's like, God damn it.
No.
How old is this?
Yeah. No. He is, I believe,
like Michael Scott.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
God, no.
Yeah. He is, I believe, around 10 years old at this time.
Great. She's got a teeny bopper to deal with.
And she's pregnant. She's pregnant too at the same time.
Oof.
So she places him on the throne next to Cleopatra to fulfill their father's will again. And Cleopatra probably didn't object to this. She understood the political necessity of it, at least from Rome's perspective, who clearly is in charge at this point. However, she would have also realized that having a child, as gross as it sounds, with her brother would not only have been unnecessary, but biologically impossible, since there is a child on the way. But hey, good for her. You look like you're playing the part. If you're pregnant on the throne and you just, your brother is now king. I mean, it could look like
right.
Well, once back in Rome, Caesar does complete his triumph with Arsinoe IV included. Now, I'll tell you, a Roman triumph, it's not like, there's a reason why we say, it was a triumph. A Roman triumph was a grand ceremony celebrating a victorious military commander or emperor, featuring a procession through Rome with the general or emperor, his soldiers, captives, and spoils of war. It served as the symbol of Rome's military might, reinforcing the authority of the ruler. Well, Caesar's plan backfired because one of his captors is Arsinoe IV. Arsinoe IV, although her birth year is not exactly known, she is definitely under the age of 18 years old at this time. And he puts her in chains and drags her behind an effigy of the Lighthouse of Alexandria through the crowds. And there is a shift in the crowds, and the crowds are like, what is he doing? This is a child.
Yeah.
Like, this is a child. What is he doing? Not only that, but it's a young girl. What is he doing? So their attitude actually shifts towards Arsinoe IV. Now, in response, Caesar makes a very calculated decision that, from my understanding, he actually does not tell Cleopatra at the very beginning, but it goes against her entire wishes. Traditionally, at the end of a triumph, the victor would execute prisoners, typically by strangulation. However, Caesar decides against this and instead offers Arsinoe IV sanctuary at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, located in modern-day Turkey. Cleopatra now has a big problem on her hands. Because, again, as long as Arsinoe IV is alive, she is a threat to her power and her life and her throne. Now, initially, like I said, I don't think Caesar informed Cleopatra about that. But, sorry, I jumped my own story ahead in my notes. My bad.
That's okay.
But there is one event about to take place that would change all of it. 22-year-old Cleopatra found that motherhood was the perfect tool to further her political agenda. Bearing Julius Caesar's child would secure her future like no other act, and did so around June of 47 BCE. However, there were a few awkward misses. Again, previously discussed, they're not married. Caesar's not the ideal father. He's not Ptolemy nor royal blood. From a Roman standpoint, acknowledging paternity for little Caesar, Caesarion, brought no advantage, and at best would cause an embarrassment to Caesar. So, for Cleopatra, this private act was the most effective diplomatic measure she could take. Amidst her struggle for survival, she hadn't considered the importance of securing her dynasty until now. By bearing Caesar's child, she ensured the survival of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Moreover, the child was a boy. Now, while the Egyptians were willing to accept a female pharaoh, history has shown that a woman needed a male consort. Like I told you earlier, thanks to Bernice, the forced messy marital affairs, she screwed that one for everybody. And with Caesarion on Cleopatra's lap, she found no difficulty ruling as female king, essentially. Before he even began to babble, Caesarion had achieved a masterful feat. He basically made his uncle, Ptolemy XIV, completely irrelevant. He was born, and Ptolemy XIV was taking a back seat. And here's little Caesarion now. Whether Ptolemy XIV realized it or not, his older sister had just gained control of both the imagery and the government. And in a stroke of perfect timing, Cleopatra seemed to have received assistance from the gods, or perhaps she was just incredibly lucky, in giving birth precisely when it was most advantageous. Caesarion's birth coincided almost exactly with the early summer rise of the Nile, which symbolically, religiously, and financially marked the beginning of the season of abundance. So this season brought basket after basket of plentiful food, which you can't plan that, I know, but it was like, come on. I mean, she's smart already, but
right.
The
timing is right.
The timing is interesting. So Cleopatra is able to solidify her image as the all-powerful goddess Isis due to the season of abundance. Now, Isis, little backstory on her, stood out as the most significant deity of the time. She possessed almost limitless powers, and therefore this is what Cleopatra is emulating at this point. Isis separated earth from sky and set the sun and moon on their paths. Fiercely but compassionately, she brought order out of chaos. She embodied tenderness and comfort, yet also held dominion over war, thunderbolts, and the sea. She healed the sick and even raised the dead. She presided over love affairs, invented marriage, regulated pregnancies, and inspired love that bonds children to parents, which essentially all about domestic life. She dispensed mercy, salvation, redemption. She was the epitome of the Earth Mother. And like most mothers, something of a shrewd, all-competent, behind-the-scenes magician. She embodied Demeter, Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite all in one. Her temples dotted Alexandria, and her terracotta statuettes adorned most of the homes as well. And determining which came first, whether Isis accounted for the supremacy of women in Egypt, or whether the Ptolemaic queens reinforced her prominence, it's kind of a challenging task. However, being such a commanding woman with this distinctly sensual aura, Isis was a less comfortable presence beyond Egypt. But Isis proved to be a blessing for Cleopatra. This is where we're going to talk about her appearance again. Because to celebrate Caesarion's birth, the new mother ordered coins struck depicting him as Horus. You can see on the left-hand side, that is a profile of Cleopatra with baby Caesarion just below her chin, supposedly suckling on her breast. So we witness Cleopatra fully embody Isis, assuming the weight of the throne she sits upon and seizing this opportunity. Now, in doing so, she elevates herself to this like sacred, sacrosanct position. Once her elevation is complete, she then aims to accomplish her next lifetime milestone, which is the legitimacy of Caesar's son. But I want to state, before we move on from these pictures, that when I said we didn't have contemporary portraits of this monarch, we don't. We only have her coinage. And so I'm actually going to pull up one. This one right here is a relatively good one. Now, the coins at the time, these would have been struck by her. It would have had to have had her approval. So if we are taking it that this is Cleopatra approving her portrait, then this is probably a good self-portrait, if you will. But as you can tell, she does have a very Greek profile to her.
She does.
She is also shown, you can't quite see it on this coin, you can in other places. I'm going to pull up her bust now, the bust on the left, and the picture on the right is a drawing or a painting. But you will see I think it's pronounced diadem, wrapped around her hair. That is of Greek influence, if I remember correctly. But you can see her features as well, a more prominent nose, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not saying her ethnicity is inconsequential. I'm giving you the facts here. I'm giving you the pictures. I'm giving you the coins for you to draw your own conclusions.
Man,
go ahead.
Say, that bust and that painting are way more flattering than that coin. That coin makes it look like Dante from Dante's Inferno.
Well, I would say the coin and the portrait on the right of the screen, the more
right.
paint looking one are reflective of each other more.
Right.
So, but anyways, so I'm laying that out there for you.
I'd executed that painter.
That painting's not bad.
Well, I'm throwing that out there for you. So, well, Cleopatra decides she is going to get the legitimacy of Caesarion taken care of. By the summer of 47 BCE, Cleopatra has successfully quelled civil unrest, purging her court of conspirators and silencing her antagonistic family members. Her dominion was characterized by unparalleled prosperity, with the majority of the land falling under royal ownership and the harvest reigning supreme in the Mediterranean world. Egypt is the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Very wealthy in land, especially. And Rome always wanted it. Let's just put it that way. So the Ptolemaic system, often likened to the control mechanisms of Soviet Russia, stood as one of the history's most tightly regulated economies, a sophisticated and formidable system that brought immense wealth to Cleopatra. This is what she did in her, basically about up until this time on the throne. Her financial capability was staggering. She amassed roughly half of Egypt's total production in her coffers, yielding an annual cash revenue estimated between 12,000 and 15,000 silver talents. Now, a modern historian notes that this was the equivalent of all of the hedge fund managers of yesteryear rolled into one.
Damn.
Funerals of the most opulent nature demanded one single talent, while a priest's annual income stood at 15. When faced with a choice between a 50-talent fine and imprisonment, prison was often chosen, as just a 25-talent fine was a devastating blow for an Egyptian. So you could say things are looking up and steady and prosperous.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, I was just trying to figure out, it's like, if it's all that, they don't have a conversion as to about what it would be in today's money. It's a hell of a lot.
It's a hell of a lot. We're just going to put it that way. It's a hell of a lot. So you could say that things are very prosperous for her at this time, because if they weren't, she would not have set sail for Rome, which is what she does. Mm-hmm. If Egypt was in turmoil, she would not have done. Everything is pretty calm. Not so much for Caesar. There are a few things worth noting that are happening simultaneously at this time in Cleopatra's story. See, Cleopatra is enjoying the prosperity of Egypt. In Rome, however, at the same time. After his expedition to Egypt, Caesar returned to Rome, his mind ablaze with the splendor grandeur of Cleopatra's kingdom. And he's eager to imprint his influence on Rome. And he embarks on this whirlwind of reforms, determined to reshape the city to a similar image of his Egyptian muse. This is the beginning of his downhill fuck up. I'm just going to put it that way.
The Romans didn't care for that too much.
No, they did not. No. They didn't care for anybody who, that had the like cult images, if you will, quote unquote, as they used to put it. So he sets to work on revamping the Roman calendar, restructuring it into 12 months with 30 days each, with additional 5-day period at the end of the year, the beginning of our calendar. These changes mirrored the organization of the Egyptian calendar, a testament to his admiration for Cleopatra's domain. But his ambitions did not stop there. He laid the groundwork for a grand public library, ordered an official census, and proposed the draining of the unhealthy marshes in central Italy, reclaiming it as precious farmland for the state of Rome. Just like Cleopatra.
Not bad policy, really. I mean,
not bad. No, not bad. But he is trying to be very reflective of Egypt, because that's what Egypt has.
Right.
Now, in a bold move, he extends citizenship to anyone in Rome who taught the liberal arts or practiced medicine. Again, not bad.
No.
To commemorate his victories in Gaul, Alexandria, Pontus, Africa, and Spain, Caesar hosted a lavish celebration spanning 11 days. The recent defeat of his rivals, including the sons of Pompey the Great in Spain, only added to this festive atmosphere.
So what's the problem? Do the Romans just hate fun?
Oh, just wait.
Okay. All right.
However, not everyone was pleased with Caesar's drastic reforms. Despite his many successes, discontent simmered among his constituents who resented the proclamation of Caesar as dictator following his triumphs.
He's getting too bossy.
Yeah.
To further complicate matters, Cleopatra arrived in Rome on a mission to compel Caesar to acknowledge Caesarion as his son. Now, in ancient Rome, from my understanding, claiming paternity merely required a man to publicly go, "This is my child."
Like Lion King style.
Yes, like Lion King style. Very much. But Cleopatra has grander designs. She sought to ensure that Caesarion would be included in Caesar's will. That's what she wanted. Now, as dictator, this would mean that not only would Caesarion inherit the lands of Egypt from his mother, but the Roman Empire from his father, should the need arise. So such an outcome would elevate Caesarion to unprecedented heights of power and influence, a position never before reached. But there was one problem. Cleopatra's name in Rome figured as a punchline. And Caesar in no way denied it. That's the issue. As rumors swirled, the tension between the Roman citizens and their dictator now continued to mount, setting the stage for a confrontation of epic proportions. The first problem arose with Caesar's triumph, the one that we've mentioned before, the spectacle unfolding during this time when Cleopatra's in Rome. This was the triumph where her sister is paraded through the streets with Cleopatra present in Rome. That's a bitch move. I'm sorry. That's a bitch move.
That's pretty messed up, yeah.
However, Cleopatra chose not to attend for a few reasons. First, a foreign ruler was not allowed within the forum during this time. That's the epicenter of day-to-day life within Rome. That's where this would have been taking place. Second, there was no reason for her to witness Caesar's reassurances to the people about the wealth that Rome could basically plunder from foreign lands. Yet her absence did not signify forgiveness for Arsinoe IV. She remained unyielding on her sister's account. For her, there was little to gain from this brutal reminder of Egypt's subjugation. After all, she had narrowly escaped a similar fate. Well, Cleopatra appeared utterly indifferent to her sister's fate during this time, going so far as to still advocate for her execution while in Rome, while her sister's being dragged behind a cart.
Well, that's what they say, when in Rome.
I guess so. I mean, she is this woman. At this point, you see Cleopatra becoming this woman of basically unyielding, unrelenting, really, ambition. I mean, she's got one ruthless goal in mind, and it's I got to ensure Caesarion is in place in Caesar's will, and nothing is going to stand in my way. Not even my sister. Kill the bitch. I mean.
So she's acting like a male in power.
And that's the issue with the Romans, with Cleopatra. Because they find her disgusting and vile. And Cicero, he's a writer at this time. I guess he's not a writer. He's kind of like a statesman. I don't know. Don't get me lying on Cicero. I was looking at Julius Caesar, not Cicero, and Mark Antony. But anyways, Cicero actually states in a letter that he writes about Cleopatra, she disgusts me. I hate her. She's vile. That was the reflection that Cleopatra was giving in Rome.
And she got more money and you more power, so I sit down and shut
that's
your
what
mouth.
it is.
Yeah.
Did you see what she did to her sister?
Right.
Well, she ain't done it yet.
Me thinks Cicero might be a little bit jealous.
Yeah. Well, she ain't done nothing to her sister yet. But during their time in Rome, Caesar and Cleopatra, they make no effort to conceal their connection and relationship. They didn't need to. And just put it that way. Caesar accommodated Cleopatra in one of his villas where he would visit her throughout her stay. What's that, Ryan?
Well, what about his wife, though? Because that was the whole deal. His wife, that's why they couldn't be together, because he had a wife in Rome. He could not be seen with Cleopatra while she is giving birth. Okay. Does not mean that he cannot have extramarital affairs. Please, he had them all the time. But she shows up with a kid who is supposed to be his.
That's not unusual.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So like I said, he puts her in one of his villas. Now, Cleopatra's presence may not have stirred affection among the men of Rome, but it certainly aroused curiosity. She embodied everything, as I was just saying, everything Roman women were not. She's outspoken, she's highly intelligent, powerful, and an equal. I'm not saying that the Roman women at that time were just dogs. Don't get me wrong. They were powerful in their own right, if you will. They were not held to a high standard, the women in Rome, is what I'm getting at. Such qualities were unimportant to Roman men, from what I've read. But even more troubling was Caesar's blatant affection for a woman who stood in stark opposition of Rome's values and customs. Caesar made a bold public attempt to integrate the Queen of Egypt into Roman life. He dedicated an ornate temple in his forum to Venus. Okay, so you have the Temple of Venus, which is the goddess from whom he claimed descent and to whom he ascribed his victories, as well as the divine mother of the Roman people. And this temple was essentially served as his office. Well, inside he places a gold life-size statue of Cleopatra beside Venus, even before erecting a statue of himself. And this move was seen as very excessive and bewildering, and a departure from what was expected of him. So it struck a dissonant note in a city where humans did not traditionally mingle among what they saw as cult images, essentially.
Right.
So during her stay in Rome, Cleopatra navigated the intricate political landscape with a keen eye and securing that future for her son by getting him into Caesar's will. That's all she has in mind. Despite her diplomatic maneuvers and efforts to sway Caesar, her aspirations remained elusive, overshadowed by the complexities of Roman politics. Now, Cleopatra, with her astute understanding of power dynamics, recognized the importance of aligning herself closely with Caesar to safeguard her throne in Egypt and maintain stability in the region. In February of 44 BCE, Caesar's authority reached its zenith with the declaration of Caesar as dictator for life. Not just dictator, but dictator for life.
Yeah, you gotta go.
Well, he was actually given that one.
Mm-hmm.
And Cleopatra found herself once again entangled in the web of Roman power struggles. This is kind of a recurring thing with these Ptolemaic leaders. While Caesar's focus shifted towards expanding his empire through a campaign against the Parthians, Cleopatra meticulously laid plans to accompany him, foreseeing an opportunity to solidify her position and strengthen her ties with Rome. However, amidst the grandeur of Caesar's ambition, Cleopatra grappled with the looming shadow of uncertainty, aware of the volatile nature of these politics and the precariousness of her alliance with Caesar. As tensions simmered in Rome over Caesar's prolonged absence that he was going to have, because it's going to take a while to defeat the Parthians. They were a powerful empire. And perceived neglect of governance, Cleopatra found herself caught in the midst of a brewing storm. And despite her efforts to navigate that treacherous current, Cleopatra could not prevent the inevitable. In March of 44 BCE, the tragic climax unfolded as Caesar, attending a session of the Senate, fell victim to a meticulously orchestrated assassination plot. 23 stab wounds later, Caesar lay lifeless on the Senate floor, a victim of his own unchecked power and the treachery of those around him. And this event not only marked the tragic end of Caesar's life, but also plunged Rome into a period of uncertainty and turmoil. For Cleopatra, the news of Caesar's brutal demise struck a chord of fear and confusion, threatening to unravel the delicate balance of power she had sought to maintain. So Rome plunges into this chaos in this aftermath of Caesar's death. Cleopatra faced the daunting challenge of safeguarding her own interests amidst this tumultuous tide in history. Her world is shattered, essentially. We're not going to pretend like it didn't hurt her. He's the father of her child. He's been assassinated. The repercussions of this probably reverberated deep within her. She had that one goal. Beyond mourning, her lover, let's put it that way, she faced the grim reality of shattered dreams. Her vision of uniting Rome under the rule of her son evaporated in an instant, leaving her in a precarious position of vulnerability. In the years that follow Caesar's demise, we begin to see Cleopatra even assume the role, according to some Roman accounts, of co-conspirator of Caesar's assassination, none of which have been verified, but you have to look at who's writing the story.
Right.
Everything we know about Cleopatra comes from the Romans. I'm putting that out there. That's why she's a seductress, an enchantress, all of that stuff. Well, despite chaos gripping Rome, Cleopatra chose to remain in the heart of the empire for an additional month after Caesar's assassination. She is driven by this desire to witness the unfolding of Caesar's will firsthand. However, the reading of the will deliver a crushing blow to Cleopatra. Neither her beloved son nor herself found mention in the document. Cleopatra harbored probably no illusions about her exclusion because by law, bound by Roman customs, he can't bequeath anything to a foreign ruler, But for Caesarion, that was a devastating moment of failure. It's really kind of the first time that we see Cleopatra fail at something.
But do we know how Caesar treated his son? Like, was there any allusion to the fact that he may have been in his will, or was it just kind of like, yeah, he's here, whatever?
I think it was one of those things that, like, he loved him. I never really found anything, of course, how Caesar felt about his own son. But from what I'm reading through and everything like that, I feel like Caesar found love for him because of Cleopatra. And so I don't think that he completely just ousted his son from his life.
Right.
But he also wasn't, he was smart. He was smart. Let's face it. He also wasn't going to stand up and go, this is my son.
So
I've been boinking the foreign queen.
Right.
I mean,
so he had to keep his son, even though he loved his son, he had to keep him at an arm's length, basically.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Well, I mean, how much contact could he have actually had with him too? Well, and plus too, I think you're right. I'm not sure if maybe that leaving him out of his will might have been strategic, because Caesar had heard the rumblings. Caesar knew that there were people that were unhappy. Maybe that was actually an effort to save his son, because if they decided to oust him, then they're going to come after his lineage. If he never declares and never leaves him anything in the will, that might have been an effort to protect him. Let me give Caesar some credit where it's not due. But
well, this basically, it's kind of the first time we see Cleopatra fail at something, which is astounding. I mean, she's at this point, she's in her mid-20s, roughly about at this point. Caesar's just been assassinated, and this is the first time we see an ultimate failure on her part, and she's navigated her entire life up till now. I mean, that's pretty freaking powerful and impressive on her part. But it also strips away any semblance of hope for Caesarion's future, as well as Caesar's heir. Instead, Caesar bestowed his favor upon his, I believe, his great nephew, Gaius Octavius, or Octavian. Or Octavian, as we will come to know him. He ends up formally adopting him and bequeathing him his name. Cleopatra's heartache deepened as she grappled with the harsh reality of defeat and the uncertain fate that awaited her and her children, because rumor has it that Cleopatra was again pregnant for a second time, and that there was no qualm about who the father was to this child conceived on Roman soil. But it's not for certain, as the records don't reflect this, but Cleopatra more than likely either miscarried or lost the baby shortly after on her solemn trek back to Egypt, from which she had been gone roughly about a year at this point from her people. She'd been away from her own throne for about a year. The return to her homeland, however, offered little respite from the storm brewing in Rome. As Cleopatra sought solace amidst the turmoil, the shadows of impending darkness loomed ominously on the horizon. Rome plunged into a year of despair, yet among the disarray, an even greater power began to emerge, casting a long shadow over the fate of nations and the course of history. And that is where we'll pick up at part 2.
Hot dog.
So that is Cleopatra for you. I am telling you, this is basically part 1 is setting up how she's brought up, her mindset, how she's raised, the choices that she makes, and we see the reflection of this very smart and intelligent, maneuvering, formidable, political, diplomat, however you want to put it, woman. I mean, she really is kind of holding her own through all of this. Now, part 2 is where she gets to show her power of everything that she learns. And she basically says, I ain't taking shit. My world has just crumbled apart because Caesar's been assassinated. So now I've got to step up to the plate and secure my future. So,
man,
what y'all think?
What a tangled web part 1 was.
All you gotta do is remember Ptolemy
and
Cleopatra.
Right.
The only 2 names you gotta remember. The numbers don't matter.
That's it.
Well, which Ptolemy? that's the.
Doesn't matter. Ptolemy. You say Ptolemy, you've got it right. So.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, it's like you don't even have to throw a dart. You just say Ptolemy and you're good.
You're good.
If you want to sound smart, it's Ptolemy the 1st through the 15th. So if you ever just want to act like you know what you're talking about, just pick one of those numbers. You're good to go.
Pick a number.
That's how many Ptolemies there were. And Cleopatra's, I think, run 1 through 8. I think
8 or 9. 9.
I think it's just 8. I think it's just 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So
well, with what you were saying, how the next episode sets up is she's wounded now. And now she's gonna take that out on.
She is.
Everybody.
I think that's one of those things that she's wounded, she's hurt, she's just had the greatest loss of her life. I mean, not only her father, the father of her child, her lover, her future, her son's future, the dynasty's future, Egypt's future. She's lost all of this when Caesar is assassinated. And what blew me away was, I guess I never knew that she was actually in Rome when that took place. I don't know how that ever escaped me with everything that I've learned and studied of ancient Egyptian stuff. I guess that little fact just blew by me. But now it's like she's about to take all that heartache and she's going to put it in with this intellect that she taught herself and that her advisors taught her. These diplomatic measures that her father taught her. This survivor that she had to be. And that mindset, and she's going to mold it all into this freaking wonderful queen and give the big old middle finger to a bunch of people.
Well, people are about to find out. You don't fuck with a wounded woman.
There will be more bloodshed in part 2. Because there's 4 major deaths in part 2. I'll give you that. Told you, everybody she knows dies. They all just just kill them off. Done. So is there anything that I told y'all that you didn't know about Cleopatra that you found fascinating?
Just what you said, that she was in Rome at the time. I didn't know that either.
I didn't realize that either. But no, her setup. Yeah, I kind of knew her setup. I can't wait to see what you tell us about whenever she's like, I've had it. And just starts whacking heads.
She's basically at that point. She just went,
I've had it. I'm heading back to my country with my peeps.
Exactly. It's like whenever you see a new TV show that comes out, that first episode, you got to set up the characters and the plot line and the storyline. I've done that for you now. Now, next week, we'll end up getting into the action of it. Because, as Shelly said, she's about to come back and just start whacking heads. She's done with bullshit. And this is probably, the second half is probably my favorite part of her story. But you got to know the first half. To be able to get to
understand the second.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, any final thoughts on her? Because I know there's not much to discuss when you do part 1s, part 2s.
Not without giving anything away. So
let's not.
Awesome. Well, so we will do part 2 next week. With that, I guess I will say.
You want to tell them everything they need to know?
I'm just waiting for my cue, Shelly. Just waiting for
I didn't know if you were ready. You started talking to me, and I was just going to let you go.
I'm going to tell everybody.
Why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Why, thank you, Shelly. That was an excellent segue and no way staged. Of course not. Well, y'all remember that After Dark with EVP Season 2 is happening right now every week on Paraflix Paranormal Plus with a new episode dropping every Thursday at 7 p.m. This week is Indiana State Sanatorium. So if you watched our podcast episode over that back in January or February, I believe is when we did it, you're going to see an extension of the evidence that we captured. This is not the same evidence that we showed you on the podcast. Yes, we caught more.
Room
Lot
16.
More. Yeah. So that is going to be on Paraflix this Thursday, 7 p.m. So make sure you catch up on episodes 1 through 6. Because next week we are going to have the season finale of After Dark with EVP Season 2, where we will have special guest Katie Stafford on with us from Ghost of Devil's Perch on the Travel Channel. He is an excellent mind in the paranormal field, and now dare we
Smart
say
as
friend.
hell.
Very smart, yes.
Yeah, now dare we say friend, because
oh yeah,
we've met him in person. We've got to hang out with him. It's absolutely fantastic. So
the nicest guy.
yes. Paraflix Paranormal Plus is available on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. So make sure you use our link to sign up, which will be posted to our Facebook page tomorrow via our link tree, and is also in the show notes for you audio listeners. Our code is AfterDark25 for 25% off your annual subscription. Again, we'll hit that on our Facebook tomorrow morning. That'll also have every social media channel we are on, our online merchandise store, our public investigations, and our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is the fastest and easiest way you can directly help support the show. For just $5 a month, you will gain access to over 350 additional Patreon exclusive videos. And your support from this goes directly to the show and all the ghostly adventures that we get to bring you week after week. This price will never change. And with that, you currently get our pre and post broadcasts, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after. Y'all hear it every week where we just act stupid. We're just idiots on there, okay? And tell a lot of embarrassing, funny stories, like Ryan wearing cutoff shorts to an opera. But anyways, it also includes our Patreon exclusive raw and unedited investigation footage. We've got full-length videos of SS methods, investigation clips, and some really funny and dirty moments within those SS methods, and we are getting ready to release more on that. So if you've ever wanted to review and watch some raw paranormal evidence footage, now's your chance. That is only on Patreon, and we do offer a 7-day free trial for our Patreon page, so you can check it out prior to purchasing. If you want to spend some time with us, our next Paracon that we are going to be at is going to be June 1st and 2nd, heading all the way up to Broadhead, Wisconsin, to Sir Sexy in Broadhead Manor and Sexy Leg Sarlo for Spirits in the Spring. We are absolutely excited. They have a wonderful lineup of speakers. We will be one of them. So it is a charity-based Paracon, which is amazing. So everything that is raised goes to charity. It is cash at the door. Cash at the door for tickets and stuff like that. They do not sell tickets online. You do get an investigation of Broadhead Manor on Saturday night for sure. I believe they're trying to plan for Sunday. That is not confirmed, though. We will be leading one of those groups. So what are you going to say, Sean?
That's a separate ticket price.
That is a separate ticket price. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is. And that, again, that is on June 1st and 2nd. So for more information on that, you can head over to Spirits in the Springs Facebook page. They've got all of that stuff, or Broadhead Manor's Facebook page. Make sure you give them both a like and a follow. They are awesome people. We love them. We cannot wait to see them. Shout out Sexy Lex Arlo and Sir Sexy. So make sure you head over and follow us on all of our social media channels as well. Search Everything Bailey Paranormal and look for the green sound waves. And remember, you audio listeners out there, you can tune into us live on Facebook, YouTube, and now Twitter each and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. So these are all the ways you can help support Everything Vaguely Paranormal, but we also appreciate your love and support for us through those likes, comments, shares, views, and downloads. And remember, any stories, questions, comments, or the like that you want to share with us, those can be submitted to us at the evppod@gmail.com. That's THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Oh, well, y'all, I got a little tongue-tied there at the end, but that's all right.
That's all right.
Hey, man, you've been talking for an hour and a half, so
I know. Well, we hope y'all enjoyed another weekly episode and part 1 of Cleopatra for Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I don't know why I just did all that way. But anyways, for myself, I am Blake Smith. With me, as always, my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pritt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. And we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye,
y'all.
Bye-bye.